Daniel,
Keegan.
welcome.
What's up, bro?
Well, this is awesome. I mean, we've wanted to hop on a podcast for about the past year and a half, I would say,
Yeah.
and now we're doing it. So I kind of want to just jump right into this. So
Perfect.
I guess the first question for you would be just, what's your story? Kind of give the audience some background, just kind of your life leading up to this moment.
Okay. So I guess I'll start in high school. I suppose I started my journey started probably in the gym lifting. First to get women, obviously, like every other kid. Yeah, and then I fell in love with just training and like what you could do with the body, and yeah, I actually after high school went to school for electrician for a couple of years. Didn't know what I wanted to do yet, and all the while I was still working out and stuff, just doing it for myself. And then when I got to the University of Minnesota, that was really when I realized I had a passion for like helping other people, figuring out, how to help people get not just better bodies, but just feel better about themselves. And so, yeah, that's really when I made the switch to kinesiology, and it was the best thing I ever did. So it got to intern for the Gophers for my senior year, and then got a graduate assistant job right away in St. Louis. So I was a strength conditioning coach there for a year and a half, and then I'm kind of skipping over a lot of stuff here, but that's
fine.
okay. Yeah, it's
Keep
just
going. You're doing good.
yeah, and then got a job with the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team, and I was with one of their rookie league affiliates.
And you were a strength coach for them?
Yep, strength conditioning coach. So yeah, I guess I had a passion for athletes, for helping athletes become bigger, stronger, faster. Probably because, after reflection, I was never athletic in high school. So looking back on that, like that was like one of my things. It was like, okay, like I didn't do this for myself when I was in high school, so maybe I can help some other people become more athletic,
Right.
And so I would say that was my experience professionally. And then after the Cardinals, I decided to move back home. Obviously, that's when I met you.
Mm-hmm.
Mark and Alyssa, your mom and dad, they own the gym in our hometown. So, yeah, you asked if I could help you rehab after an injury. And that kind of is what started my own business, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of took off. So, yeah, I did my own training, strength conditioning business in our hometown for a while, and then COVID hit. So, yeah, really, I guess COVID made me kind of take a long look at myself and like what I was doing, how I was helping people. And I would say that's always been the passion of mine, is what I can give to other people. And once COVID hit, it was obviously tough right away. You were working for me right before COVID hit. And yeah, it kind of went, I went to Florida in the middle of March with my business, and I returned a week later, and I never went back into the gym to train people. Mm-hmm. And I actually haven't trained anyone since then. So yeah, I guess it made me reflect a lot. And after the reflection, through a lot of hard work on myself, I would say my passion kind of grew into, and I've said it before since then, and I kind of regret saying it. I've made the point like athletics don't matter, and that's not true. Athletics matter, but for myself, what I found was, again through COVID, I kind of found out my calling was higher. Like I was supposed to help people on a higher level than just athlete performance, and so I guess that got me into doing a lot of research, spiritually and cognitively.
So what did that spiritual and cognitive research look like?
So it started with a lot of meditation on my part, a lot of reading, books you recommended, but books some other people have recommended as well. I heard from other podcasts. So if I would listen to a podcast and they'd recommend a book and I thought it was something good for me, I'd get it. So I guess COVID kind of gave me the space and time to, like I said, do that reflection and then do that research that I wanted to kind of get back into, I don't know, I kind of felt like I lost myself a little bit, which I don't like. That's shitty language because you never lose yourself, right? Like you're always yourself. But I felt like I lost a little bit of my, like, what I was supposed to do, like my purpose, or maybe I lost some insight from that. So, yeah. And then after, honestly, like meditation was probably the single biggest thing for me. Mm-hmm. If I had to, and anyone that knows me knows I preach meditation a lot now, just because I've seen such the effect that it's had on my own life, and that mindfulness for me has never really been there.
Yeah. So first, I kind of want to have you dive into more of the effect that meditation has had on your life, and then also give background on what your meditation practice looks like, because I feel like a lot of people hear the word meditation and they think it just means thinking nothing, and it seems kind of spiritual and woo-woo, but just kind of give some background on how it's impacted you and I guess how you meditate.
So when I first started meditating, it was awful. It was probably one of the worst things I've ever done, because for the first time, I realized like I couldn't sit still and not have my mind just go bananas. And that was really the first glimpse I kind of had, and it was like, oh shit, like that whole monkey mind thing is real. Like we do have, I think that's innately prescribed to us, I think, is just that constant thought loop that we all, I'm asserting that we all do it. I don't know. I guess I can't speak for anyone else, but so I guess when I first started meditating, it was terrible. It was awful. But you hear so many people say how good it is, and I was like, they can't all be wrong. I mean, you pushed me to do it more, I would say more so. And then, yeah, once I remember the first time I actually was able to like sit 15 minutes, and because that's what I would always start doing, is I would always set my timer on my phone for like 10 or 15 minutes. And for anyone listening, I would definitely recommend starting shorter than that, even 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Like a lot of people don't realize how hard it is to sit in one position, motionless, and only think about your breath for 2 minutes.
So that's how you would recommend people to start doing it?
I personally would, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And because I don't think, again, people hear the word meditation and they think foo-foo, but as soon as you try it and you realize you can't actually, I'm again, this is just an assumption, but most people that don't meditate, I think if they tried to do it for 2 minutes, like you'll find your mind wanders very fast. Mm-hmm. And to that point, I think one of the biggest misconceptions of meditation is that your mind shouldn't wander, right? So like I've gotten it from so many people, like I just can't meditate. I can't keep my mind from wandering. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. Like that's why you should be meditating, because that mind wandering, that's exactly what meditation teaches you to do.
And not only that, I feel like being able to recognize where your mind goes when it wanders and understand the way you think and the things you think about, I think has a lot of power. And that's part of the practice too, is for me, when I meditate, I really try to, because my mind's going to wander regardless. I mean, it's not it's not like you just stop thinking. Like it seems to be this in and out flow where you'll be present for a little bit, feel no thoughts, then it'll come back. And I think first off, it's just detaching yourself from those thoughts and trying to analyze them from a third party and kind of see what do I think about? What do I stress about? And it just really seems to be a practice of increasing your awareness of yourself and how you believe you fit in this world.
The awareness, I think, is the key that you just touched on, because, like, to your point, like, until you actually try to sit there and only focus on your breath, I don't think most people realize what those subconscious thoughts are that they're having all the time. They know that they're back there and they know that they have them, but I don't think a lot of people have the awareness of, like, what the hell those actually are. And then not only that, well, I mean, you know, once you figure out what they are, that's just like the tip of the iceberg, because then you got to figure out what the fuck is causing them.
What's the root?
Exactly. Like, what happened in my childhood or in my past that gives me this thought now, right? Because we all have, again, I would assert, like, we all have these feelings of inadequacy, not being wanted, loneliness. I believe we all have these from us at birth, honestly. Like, I think, and then as we go through childhood and teenage years and everything, like, those get reinforced, not because they actually, I mean, you can look for evidence to reinforce any belief that you have. So once those beliefs are there and external forces reinforce them, then we get caught in this, oh yeah, well, that is right, because this person said it too. So now I've had this thought all along, and then these people are backing this up. Well, it must be a truth. It must, my belief of my inadequacy or my not being wanted must be a truth. And then we hold on to that. And honestly, for meditation wise, that was really my first glimpse into what those thoughts actually were, so that I could do the deep diving to figure out where they came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when we come back to the word awareness or self-awareness, to me, that's one of the most powerful journeys you can partake on, is deciding you are going to be on the path of increasing your self-awareness, understanding yourself. And meditation for me has been a very powerful practice to doing that. And I think you would agree with that. And there's many other practices too. I mean, I know we talk about journaling a lot. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's you're seeing your thoughts on paper and
absolutely
kind of can see patterns and trends. So I guess just talk a little bit about your journaling practice and how that has helped you too.
Yeah, so I guess I would meditate and journal together is kind of how I started. I shouldn't say I started doing that, but once I found out that they're, like, if I journaled before my meditation, and it doesn't have to be a lot, just kind of what you're thinking, whatever, and then you go into your meditation, usually, in my experience, you come out with things that you want to write down in your journal more. And again, like, to your point about awareness. So, like, I'll never forget the first 15-minute meditation I had. I was sitting on a pillow in my living room, and for the first time, like, that detachment you talked about. So I actually, in my meditation, eyes were closed and everything, the room was dark, and I actually, so when I would used to start meditating, I would always try to focus on my breath, and not only how it felt, but then I would try to, like, visualize, like, what it looked like, my diaphragm contracting and relaxing, and the air going, into my lungs and exhaling and all of that. So I would try to get, like, a visualization. And then the one time it happened, it's like my consciousness actually, and I know this is just visualization, but this is just what I interpreted. My consciousness kind of like sunk down in my head, and to a vantage point where not only could I watch my breath and feel it, but then I could also look up and I could see the subconscious thoughts that were on like a movie reel loop, just like going by.
So this is your visualization. You were looking up at your subconscious thoughts on a loop.
Yeah, and it was the first time it ever happened, like I said, in a meditation. I mean, it's the first time I've ever had that visualization period, but then I was just able to, I remember I was able to look up at the movie screen and I could keep seeing all of these thoughts, these visual thoughts that I would have. And I remember looking up at them and thinking like, oh, wow, like this isn't me. Like this is external. Like this isn't who I am as a person. These are just thoughts. And that was the first time I've actually really felt that detachment. And I think that's huge because before that, I just always assumed like that was just me. Like that was just part of me. And until that experience, I guess, after I kind of felt this sense of like me, the person I am, is the soul inside. And I have this, you call it meat suit, this body. And then I also have the mind with the thoughts. And although I can control them, well, just the very fact that I can control them tells you that they're not part of you. There's something else, right? And so I think that was like the first time I actually experienced it and the first time I actually felt it. And so from there, then on, it was just like, okay, what else can I do with meditation? And so like now, like recently I've gotten into more like breath work and stuff, and I'm just touching. I mean, you and I both are. Mm-hmm. We haven't really dived too far into that, but there's something definitely there that's beneficial.
Yeah, I want you to dive into that. Talk about your recent experiences with breathwork. Kind of talk about your technique and then also the effect it's giving you.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of people listening, I've heard of Wim Hof, and he's he's a really good guy to listen to and learn from. So basically, I took, I would say primarily his advice. And I remember watching a podcast with him and Rogan, and he was basically trying to get Rogan to breathe heavier. And Rogan was he got to a point where Joe Rogan was like, I can't go anymore. And he's like, come on, you fucking pussy. Keep going, keep breathing, you can do it. And so what I got out of that is basically our brain always wants us to stop earlier than we should, right? I mean, that's just the protective mechanism. So what I did the first time I tried the deep breathing, I was actually in the bathtub meditating and completely dark. So usually I have like incense burning or a little candle of some sort. So I have like a tiny bit of light. That time it was completely dark. So if I opened my eyes, it looked the same as if they were closed. And I just started breathing in through my nose and mouth, everything. And then I just like kept trying to make it deeper and kept trying to exhale more and then inhale more and exhale. And I kept trying to increase not only the amount of oxygen I was breathing in, but also the amount of carbon dioxide I was breathing out.
So is it a forceful inhale?
Yes, it was. And I would say to that point, like going back to the meditation, I always used to meditate in a state of just trying to let my breath happen and be aware of it. So I would try not to force anything, right? Not to actually make myself breathe any type of way. With the breath work, I was doing the exact opposite. I was actually physically trying to force as much air. And again, this is for anyone listening, I don't know what proper breath work is, so don't take my recommendations for it. This is just what I experienced. So basically, like when I got to a certain state and I could feel like everything from my diaphragm up. At first I thought it was a burning sensation, but then after I did it again, I realized it was almost like I used the analogy of like a tuning fork to you, because that's kind of what it felt like. I did have some like a prayer chant going on also.
So there was audio.
There was audio, yes. There was music. The Devi prayer, yeah. For anyone listening, find that because it's awesome. But yeah, so basically, like from my diaphragm up, it felt like it was resonating at a frequency that I can't explain. I've never felt that before, ever. And I believe this. I actually, again, I was in the bathtub at the time. I actually got freaked out. So my whole thing of like telling you like I've overcome my fear of death, that obviously is not true, because in that moment I got scared as shit and I was like, fuck, what if I drowned? Like, what if I pass out? Like, I didn't know. So I stopped and then just kind of sat in it for, I don't know, probably 5 or 10 minutes, and it stayed there. Like, and I just tried to meditate in it. But it got me to a point where I was a little, I was scared. I didn't know what the hell was going to happen.
So it was different than meditation. You felt that you were in a different state of consciousness that you weren't familiar with?
Yes. I was definitely not familiar with it. And it was definitely different than meditation.
And this came solely from breathwork?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was, like I told you the day it happened, I didn't count. I don't know how many breaths I actually did, but I would assume it was less than 75. So like, I know the people that you've researched and like the little bit I've done on breath work, like there's some people that go for 2 or 3 hours in a session.
Holotropic breath.
Holotropic. Yeah. And so like, this was literally less than 2 minutes. It had to, I know for a fact I was breathing less than 2 minutes. So I couldn't even imagine going for 2 hours, but it was, it's definitely something I'm going to explore more, because I know that there's something there. I don't know what it is, but yeah.
Can you just give an example? Because we're going to have video for this too, just like 3 to 5 breaths.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I kind of started. So I was just kind of laying back in my tub and so just keep increasing as heavy and as much as I possibly could. And I actually, so through another podcast, and I actually just found this out last night, there's actually a medical term for it, respiratory alkalosis. And it's essentially you're alkalizing your blood, I think. You're decreasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. And so the effect that it has, I have no idea. I can't speak to that. I don't know what the hell it is. I just want to explore it more because it reminded me of psychedelic. It reminded me of some sort of like I was on the verge of going somewhere or doing, something like that. So again. So
it felt similar to taking a psychedelic substance.
I would say it felt the most similar to the 5-MeO.
Okay.
I never got.
To give you guys some background, he's talking about 5-MeO dimethyltryptamine, which is a secretion from a toad called Bufo alvarius. So basically what they do is they capture or hunt these frogs or toads. And there is some unethical practices because I think there's actually a shortage of this stuff right now. But it doesn't hurt the toad. So basically I don't know the exact technique, but they extract secretion from the toad's back. And then they just let it crystallize and harden on a piece of glass. And then you vaporize that and you have one of the most profound experiences of your life. Me and you have both experienced it, and I think we can both agree that there's no words for it. But I definitely want to dive into that a little more. But let's go back one second for the breath work.
Yeah.
So this is fascinating stuff because it's just from your breath. And
yeah, there was nothing. It was in the morning. I was fasted, obviously. I hadn't eaten anything, but yeah, there was no cannabis. There was nothing involved at all in that. So it was just straight me and my breath, and something fucking happened. I don't know what it was, but.
So holotropic breath work, for those of you listening, is definitely a subject to look into if you're wanting to experience different states of consciousness without having to take illegal substances. The term holotropic breath work was coined by Stanislav Grof, who was a psychologist who, I forget where he's from, but he passed away recently, and he was doing LSD research in the 60s for therapy use. And what he found is that this form of breath work could get people to the same states as LSD. And a lot of people who are practitioners of this or practice this type of breath work, they say it's the way that it's different from psychedelics is that you're taking yourself there. So it's almost a form of empowerment, but also you have more control because you can, like you started to get scared or you didn't know what was going on, so you could stop it by just stopping to breathe. But if you take some LSD, you have to buckle up and go along with the ride. So it's a little bit of a different, experience. But I think it's just fascinating how through breath we can get to these same states. And I kind of want to dive into psychedelics, entheogens, plant medicines. So basically, there's these natural medicines, as some people call them medicine, some people call them drugs, some people call them hard drugs. But there's, what
are we classifying as drugs here,
Right.
Because like sugar,
coffee, caffeine.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's basically, the most famous psychedelics are mushrooms, magic mushrooms.
Psilocybin.
LSD, DMT, ayahuasca. These are all substances that allow us to experience different states of consciousness. So I want to kind of ask you about your journey with entheogens and just kind of talk about how they've impacted you.
Okay, so I personally consider cannabis to be the first like psychedelic I've done. And I know most people don't think of cannabis as that. Eric, is kind of the one that put me onto that concept. And then, but if you narrow down a psychedelic as just having an effect on the psyche, on the mind, I think you could say cannabis is in there. But I only point to that because that was my first experience with it. And the very first thing I noticed, so like I partook in some cannabis use when I was in high school, and then basically switched to just alcohol. And then I would just, like, my early 20s were not, they were not good alcohol wise. And then, but I had never experienced cannabis after high school, up until a few years ago. And then, I guess when I started using cannabis, it wasn't in that manner, in that intention.
You said intention, kind of explain that.
Yeah, so
a little bit.
Basically, like everyone knows, you can go and just if you what matters about whether your experience is obviously like what you plan to personally do with whatever it is that you're taking, right? So obviously I went through a period where I would just get high to get high, and it was no different than how most people use alcohol nowadays, right? I would assert that most people use alcohol as some sort of escapism, right? And I say alcohol because it's the one, again, quote unquote, drug that is not only perfectly legal, but it's accepted in our society. Promoted, right? And so, and this isn't this. Just so everyone is very clear, this is not a bash against alcohol, because I do still drink, okay? And I enjoy drinking. But what I found out, and I'm sure everyone that's gotten drunk has felt this, they even have a name for it, liquid courage, right? So what is liquid courage to you? Have you ever experienced it?
Yeah, it kind of takes away all your fears, and yeah, just lets you kind of step out of the state of fear to just do stuff that might not be the smartest.
Like you feel like you're a little bit invincible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So and again, this is more retro or reflection, but what I've realized, and listen to other people explain it, like alcohol heightens your ego. And so like if we talk about the two, ego and soul, those are the two parts of us, right? Alcohol definitely heightens your ego to the point of it gives you a little bit more invincibility. It thinks you're just a little closer to Superman. Like, you could pick a fight with a guy that you usually wouldn't pick a fight with, right? Or, I mean, everyone's experience, I think everyone has probably experienced this. Man, woman, it doesn't matter. So the distinction I make is with cannabis, what I realized very early is that it kind of did the exact opposite. And so, like when we talk about alcohol raising the ego, cannabis actually did the opposite for me anyway. And it kind of dissolved the ego. And so what I mean by dissolving the ego, it made me actually look inside more and become more introspective and figure out, okay, like what is my soul actually telling me? And it just made me think a lot more about like what I'm put here on earth to do and why, the habits I have and everything like that, right? So now I will also say I've definitely been to a point where I abused cannabis 1,000%. But I would also, I would assert that it isn't the substance, just like alcohol is not a problem, right? It's the way that people use them. And so, back to the whole psychedelic thing, then when I noticed when I used cannabis with the intention of, okay, motherfucker, you're going to sit here and meditate for a half hour, and this cannabis is just going to help you go a little deeper inside yourself.
So to give some context of the word psychedelic,
yeah,
it translates to mind revealing or soul revealing. So
perfect. I didn't know that, so that's good, because that is beautifully put. That is exactly how I felt. And so basically, yeah, that was my first experience, and I found out very fast that if I used something like cannabis in the correct way, it was extremely beneficial for myself. So then you are the one that asked if I wanted to try psilocybin. And this was obviously after, we did a lot of research. You did a lot of research yourself. And then when you brought it up to me, I started doing a lot of research, listening to a lot of podcasts.
So psilocybin is the psychoactive chemical that's inside of what is known as magic mushrooms.
Yes. Yep. Very good.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So after a lot of research and a lot of soul searching, I guess, I decided to give it a try. I guess with my education background, I'd always been like too far one way I always thought I was too far one way of like always having to be on the science end of it and the research and all of that. But I think there's the other end of the spectrum where like you got to experience shit for yourself. And again, I think you kind of brought that to my attention more. So yeah, it was something I decided I really wanted to try. And it was the worst fucking night of my life to that point, or up to that point. And when I say it was the worst night, it was because I didn't want to do what it was wanting me to do.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I took them and
took the mushrooms,
and what did we do? Like 3 grams, 3.5. It was something
we
like
each
that, right?
did
Or 4.
four.
Okay. So after about a half hour, I decided I need to lay down. And obviously, like I shouldn't say obviously, colors were getting brighter. I experienced that first. And then I had a feeling, and every time I explain this, I hate it because I can't say that there was a voice in my head, but also there was something that was like controlling me in a way, or guiding me, I should say.
Yeah, it seems to be, especially with mushrooms, that it's almost as if the mushroom has a consciousness that communicates with you. And
maybe it does.
Yeah.
I mean, we think it does, actually, don't we?
I mean, after experiencing it, I would say that seems very likely. Like it lines up with that theory.
There has to be something there, and I really don't assert to the argument, oh, you're just fucking up your mind. Like you're just having it's just different chemicals in your mind. It doesn't. Anyone that's gone through that experience, I think, would say the same thing. It's different than, it's just different than what we were all led to believe.
There seems to be at least in my experiences, a presence during your psychedelic trip with mushrooms that is almost guiding you to places of your mind that you had before that kind of shied away from, and it really forces you to confront things that need to be confronted. Like it has this intelligence that knows what you need to experience, and it seems like that's what started happening once you lay down on the floor. So
that the perfect word I think you just said was intelligence, because that's kind of what I felt like. So so something was just telling me like you got to go lay in your bed. Do you want me to uncover the whole thing?
If you're comfortable with it.
Well, yeah, I don't care. So basically I'm laying in my bed, and I close my eyes. And I mean, different things are, I'm hallucinating never really happened, but I was definitely seeing shapes and colors in my head when I'd close my eyes. And then, and this was a couple of years ago, so it's hard to think back to the exact, but this guide this intelligence was saying that I was basically telling me I needed to take a deep look into why I was doing the things I was doing, and basically like why I was living my life, and like what was the purpose. And I mean, I cried. I was scared. I researched parts of myself, or dove into parts of myself that I've never gone before. And that was the most ego-shattering experience I've ever had. Or again, up to that point, right? Because after that, I really had to think for a while, and I would say it didn't really hit me for at least a month or two after. The lingering effects of the psychedelic.
What didn't hit you?
Just the totality of everything that happened. So, I mean, I think you similar, or have the similar reaction where like after you do a psychedelic trip, like the succeeding days after, like you're still trying to process. Okay. Like a lot of shit goes on that in the moment you can't wrap your head around completely, but then in the days and weeks after, and you keep journaling about it and you keep meditating on it and everything like that, that's when you like start getting the answers. And like for me, like, I was training at the time, owned my own business. I was training athletes. I was training people to lose weight, everything, And during the trip, again, this intelligence basically told me, like, don't fucking kid yourself. You think that you're trying to do this to help other people, but you're really not. You're doing this to help yourself. You're not doing this for genuine intention. And it was the biggest shot to my ego. And it actually made me think, like, fuck. Like, you're right, I'm not doing this to help other people. I mean, that was a byproduct, but I was really doing it to be the hero. I was really doing it to get to be the guy, the Tony Robbins-esque figure that, you know, just gets to help everyone, but he gets to be the hero, right? And like, that's what I realized. That's really why I wanted to quote unquote help people.
So these mushrooms brought you to that awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I'd ever had it before. I always thought that I was doing. I did, and I truly do believe my soul really did want to help people, but I think what the psilocybin brought me the awareness to is this other side, this ego, that although you might be serving your soul with part of it, that's really the secondary. Like, you're really serving your ego. And in my opinion, it should be the exact opposite. You're always going to, like, working out, for example. If you work out for health and for your mental clarity and your, you know, to get your mind right and everything like that, generally speaking, your body will follow suit. But like, I realized I was only working out. I didn't give a shit about how healthy I was only working out to have a good body, like all of the superficial things, right? And so now, like, I realized, like, if you listen to your soul, if you listen to that voice inside, the, you know, we call it intuition, you know, the gut feeling, whatever you want to call it. Like, to me, that's our soul speaking to us. And I think when you listen to that should really be your guiding force in life. That should really be that source that you try to tune into, in my opinion. And I think until the psilocybin, I don't think I actually grasped what that felt like, or that connection.
So I think you used the words "worst night of my life."
Yeah.
So do you mean? I think you mean it was the most difficult night of your life.
Yeah. So, like, when I say it was the worst night of my life, if you would have asked me as I was going through that, it was the worst night of my life. As I was going through it, funnily enough, it ended up being one of the best nights of my life. I mean, looking back now, right? And I feel like that's kind of life. That's the way life goes. Because when we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, we usually come out better on the other end. I don't know why that is. I mean, I'm sure it's got something to do with us having to adapt. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that psychedelics, along with a myriad of other things, are one way to make yourself uncomfortable. And I just want to make this clear, because I know there's people listening that are like, these guys are fucking crazy. They're doing hard drugs. They're tripping balls, hallucinating. Why would anyone want to do that? So why would you recommend people to partake in the psychedelic experience?
I don't think we should recommend, personally. And the reason why I say that is I personally don't think you recommended them to me. I think you brought them to my awareness. Yeah. And when I was ready, then I came to you and said, all right, like, I think I'm ready to do this.
Yeah, I also want to make this clear. We're not out here telling people, hey, everybody go find your local drug dealer, get some mushrooms and take them tonight. That's not what we're talking about.
And cannabis, same thing, guys. Like, for real, like, listen to yourself and listen to your, like, and I don't, that's why, like, I stopped making recommendations. Like, fuck that. I hope I can just provide awareness to people, really. Yeah. And all we can do is share our experiences, right?
I think in the psychedelic space, we get a lot of people who then have an experience, changes their life for the better, and then they start telling people how to be, how to think, what to do.
And I'm as guilty of that as anyone else.
Me as well.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm able to notice it, because I've been that
Exactly.
guy, and at times probably still am.
Me
But
too.
I just can you just explain a little bit more, like, why would anyone want to do this? Or like,
Yeah. Well, to the point of uncomfortability, I would argue that and again, that's like going back to breath work, and like there are other things that people can do. If you are completely against taking, an exogenous substance, I would argue nobody is against that, because we all eat and, whatever. But people have different beliefs, so that's fine. So there are obviously other ways, but what I would really like down to the basics for me is that self-reflection and that deep dive into yourself that I personally don't think the average person has access to, quite honestly. I mean, I don't think I had access to it before. And that's not to say that it wasn't always there, but I think the human mind is so fucking vast, and I think we hold on to stuff so much more than what the average person thinks.
I think plant medicine, psychedelics, entheogens, these are synonymous terms, but what they seem to be is, in my experience, it's a self-reflection tool. It's not, I mean, there's a lot of what seems to be, I wasn't alive during the 60s or 70s, obviously, but looking back, there seems to be a lot of propaganda around, oh, you are going to want to jump out of your window because you think you're going to fly. These are crazy hard drugs. And
mind you, the CIA, our Central Intelligence Agency, had specific departments for this exact thing.
Yeah. It was, I think the experiment they were running was called MK Ultra.
MK Ultra is one of them, yes.
And so these are really fascinating substances, because the effects are not, I personally don't believe that they are what a lot of us are led to believe. Now, that's not to say that when taken recreationally, that these can't be harmful things.
Absolutely.
Anything taken without an intention to better yourself, explore yourself, understand yourself. If you are taking things like mushrooms, LSD, DMT to want to get high, to escape, it's not going to give you that same experience of introspection, and maybe it will. It just might make it a lot more difficult for you. But I really want to make it clear, I'm not recommending anybody to take these substances. We're simply talking about our experiences.
Absolutely.
And they just seem to be very powerful, that have shaped my life, and I think you would attest to that too.
And I should also say, this is definitely something. I mean, so I'll admit it. Like, I think I started drinking when I was 15. Would not recommend that at all. I really wouldn't. The more research that comes out, like the earlier in development your brain is, the least I mean, realistically, like in a perfect world, probably nobody would do any of these things until they're at least 20, 25. If you actually go by the research of when the prefrontal cortex is done actually, molding, actually like forming. So that should be a word of caution. But I find the hypocrisy of our society so fucking funny, because people escape all the time with food and alcohol and caffeine, but those are okay because a fuckload of corporations have figured out how to make money, therefore making our government money off of them, right? And I look at like things like cannabis, psilocybin. What do those have in common? They're actually easily grown. So like you ask yourself, like, why are these things not legal? It has nothing to do with protecting us.
They literally come from the earth, guys.
They grow in the ground. unlike the fucking Pop-Tarts and cereal you eat and the host of everything else that we all put, shove in our body. But these are actually grown in the ground and provided by Earth or God or the universe, whatever you surmise. So, like, that's where, like, the hypocrisy of what we believe to be okay and what we believe not to be okay is just fucking stupid, in my opinion. I mean, let's just call it what it is. So, especially with, like, you want to talk about like a 60% obesity rate in America. Like, there's COVID right there. If you're obese and you get COVID, you have a lot greater chance of dying. Or if you have heart disease, from eating a lot of shitty food, like, you're going to be at higher risk of dying from COVID. And this is not to pass judgment on, any of those sets of people, obese, heart disease, like all of those, because I understand, like, we were all conditioned to believe that that's just the way life had to be. Right. So I've been in that space where I'm stuffing my mouth because I think that is what's going to make me feel better. Right. So this is not to, cast any judgment on anybody really, because I honestly, like, at the end of the day, I only have the utmost compassion for what everyone goes through on a daily basis, what everyone has went through as a child. Like, we all have our own shit that we're dealing with. And a lot of people's shit was a lot worse than mine. I was pretty fucking fortunate. I was pretty blessed. And the fact that I still had shit that I had to work through. I mean, I was never abused when I was a kid. I was, never raped. I was never anything, right? So I never had to lose a parent. I never had to anything like that. So I can't say that I had this terrible childhood, right? Yeah, we might not have had that much money. Like, big deal. I was overweight as a kid. Big fucking deal, right? Like, in the grand scheme of life, like, that, those aren't that big of obstacles. So I consider myself extremely fortunate and extremely blessed. And I still had shit I had to work through. And I think that's like, if we get down to the meaning of life, like, I really think that's what it is I think it's overcoming all of this pre-downloaded shit that we have in our subconscious. And I think the whole point of life is to come through that and with your soul and actually transcend what it means to be the stereotypical suffering human. Because at the end of the day, like, I truly do believe, and again, nothing but fucking compassion for anyone out there that is suffering, but a lot of people are suffering. And in my opinion, a lot of people are suffering needlessly.
It seems to be a insanely big epidemic that we're in. This mental health, depression, anxiety, PTSD. There are so many people that are suffering and struggling through these things, and it's not talked about. Well,
thinking about, like, the people back home right now. Shout out to everyone listening in Minnesota. Like, y'all are still shut down, if I'm right. Except the gyms are open, I guess. Thank God they at least did that. Like, that's good. But, like, we're in Texas, everything's open right now. Like, you just have to wear a mask everywhere. So I know there's a lot of people, again, especially back home, but just everywhere, that are struggling with a lot of shit. And I think what the average person fails to realize is the shit that they're struggling with is, and this is not to say everyone's circumstances are great, right? But the stuff that people are struggling with are primarily due to the lens that they view life from. And if we can all understand that the lens that we do view life from is a culmination of what we actually believe to be true about ourselves. And if you just like let that sink in for a little bit, like I don't want to say all, but I would again assert that most of our suffering that we do is from our perspective and the lens that we view life through. And just to know that the way that you view yourself personally is really the only thing that matters. Because until you actually come to terms with yourself and who you are as a person, if you're still holding on to judgment internally, then how in the hell are you not going to judge everything else or everyone else, right? And so, like, if you ask me, like, what my passion is, like, that is really, like, what I want my life's work to be, is just to help people realize, like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, yeah, you've had shitty things happen, right? Like, yeah, COVID might be shitty for you, but there's nothing wrong with you as a person. We've all had our different circumstances that we've gone through, but it goes back to like what you and I were talking about before, this was a different day, but basically how we all have the capability as humans. We all have that capability to be Adolf Hitler. And we also all have the capability of being a Mother Teresa or Jesus or anyone else that you aspire to be, right? Like, those were both ends of the spectrum, right? But they're all human. And so actually being able to grasp that concept of we are all different people with different circumstances and different life experiences, but we're all fucking one. Like, we are all part of this universe, this bigger thing. I mean, you and I both believe in God. Like, we talk about that a lot. Like, we're very spiritual. But even if you don't believe in God, you have to believe something created this. So if you don't think that God created this, then you I'm assuming are surmising that the Big Bang Theory happened, in which case the universe would be the creator, right? Whichever way you want to look at it, again, no judgment, I don't care. But whatever did create this has to be inside of us. Again, we say it's God, right? So part of God is inside of us, which means that we have the absolute capability of creating any fucking thing that we want. Like, we have that deep inside of us. So when I see all of these people struggling so much with, again, their mental health and just they're struggling with their circumstances, I can't help but feel empathy for them, because I know that if they were able to change their perception of life and their perception of their circumstances, I know they would be able to see life through a completely different lens. And like, to bring it back to psychedelics, I don't know if that's what they do. To sit here and tell you that I know what psilocybin did to me, I can't. I don't know. But I do believe that it just offered that awareness to me, that perspective to me. Yeah, and that's how I would say it.
Beautiful. That was very well said. I think because it's hard to just, everything you said was accurate, but it's hard for someone to hear, just change your perception and your suffering will end.
I know it is. Because again, and I don't want to, I know everyone that hears that is actually suffering is going to be like, of course, this fucking guy. Like, two white males talking about quote unquote struggling. Like, obviously in the grand scheme of things, like, you and I've had pretty good fucking lives. Yeah. I think we can say that, right? We both feel pretty blessed.
We're very privileged.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, it's not to make light of other people's suffering. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I guess I would present the option of a an alternative way of viewing things. And what I mean by that is, like, I hear a lot of people talk about how 2020 was the worst year ever, right? And I get it. Like, I understand why people say that. I really do. But also at the same time, I think it depends on if you have the perspective of life is happening to me versus life is happening for me. Right? Because what do you think, if life is happening to you, how are you going to react to COVID?
You're going to be pissed off.
Yeah, like, fuck this disease, like this pandemic, like, how is this happening to us, right? Like, why is this happening to us right now? But everyone would just realize, if you turned the perspective around and realize that everything just happens, like, life is just happening, and we get to choose whether it's happening to us or for us. Life is just going to happen regardless, and we don't have any control of that. Everyone would agree with that, I think. But what we are in control of is how we view things and what we decide to manifest in our own lives, right? We can't control the universe. We can't control anything externally that happens, and we sure as fuck can't control other people. And that's where I think a lot of people's issues come from, is they don't feel like they have control over themselves personally and how they feel and how they interact with everything. And so they don't have that control of themselves, so then they try to control everything else. They try to control their circumstances, or they try to control their loved ones. They try to control the person they're in a relationship, their best friends, whatever it is, right? And again, I only know this because I've been there. I really have. But once you actually let go of that and realize, like, the only person you are ever going to have control over is yourself. And most people don't really have control over themselves either. I would say it's a consistent practice of myself that I try to work on. But when you realize, like, life is just going to happen regardless of whether you like it or not, and it's how you view things and what lens you decide to view it through is going to dictate how you come out of it. So again, like, we go back to, if you have the mentality of COVID's happening and I want to play the victim card, then I could say, well, fuck, I was self-employed before this. I lost my business. I had an employee, right? And that, obviously, I could have taken the approach, like, I lost all these things, right? Or I could take the approach of, okay, life is trying to show me something, and what the fuck am I going to do with it? Which is the route that both of us chose.
So I would ask you, what have you learned since all this has started?
Ooh. Since all COVID has started? I mean, I would say the biggest thing I learned is how to be comfortable with myself. In which case, I think, is why a lot of people are struggling. Honestly, like, if I'm being completely honest, like, I feel like a lot of people are struggling because they've built their whole lives on escaping the person inside. And instead, they've lived their lives to try to change their circumstances. But if you just realize how futile that is, because the circumstances are always going to change, and they're always going to be changing. But if you come from a perspective of love and compassion for yourself first and foremost, then all life kind of ends up happening and taking care of itself.
One thing I will say is, again, it's easy for us to say, have compassion and love for yourself. And one thing that I think has really helped me develop more compassion and love for myself has been psychedelics.
Yeah.
It hasn't been an experience of I'm getting high. This is fun.
Yes.
It's almost like going into a classroom, and you're really forced to look at you for who you are, and not just look at it, but really work through it.
You have to sit with it.
Yeah, and it's so much more than just the experience too, because after you sit with it, go through it, you have all this new perspective on yourself, life, your place, and all of this. You have to integrate that, and you have to unpack it and understand it. And these aren't things that are addictive. I mean, it's the last thing after a psychedelic experience, the last thing I want to do the next day is do it again.
Oh no, yeah.
Like there is a long time in between these experiences for me, because it takes a lot to integrate it, understand it, and actually become the person it showed me I can become. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes them so powerful, as opposed to these other forms of medicine like antidepressants, something you have to take every single day, that are...
That's a good point.
Toxic for your brain.
Extremely toxic.
As opposed to something that comes from the earth, like mushrooms, that have actually been shown to increase neuroplasticity, to change neural pathways, and in my experience have absolutely changed my life for the better.
Well, and they've been proven to help with things like PTSD, depression,
anxiety,
and
addiction.
And I should say, and I heard Aubrey Marcus say this, and it was beautifully put. And he said, it's not the actual psilocybin or the substance that is doing any of the healing. It's not. The only thing that substance does is it cracks a doorway open, and it says, hey, fucker, if you want to find out what's going on, like open this door and walk through.
You have to walk through it.
You got to go through it. And that, like, when I say sit with it, people should understand, like, when I did my only trip of psilocybin I've ever had, it was like 3 or 4 hours. And yes, you have to sit through that. Like, there's no escaping it. Once you do it, like, that's it. Like, you're going through it. But like you said, I think it's the sitting with it for the days and weeks after. And I would, even if people don't try to like meditate and journal and stuff after, you can't tell me they don't think about it still, because, or at least in my experience, because it was such a profound and awakening experience that I wanted to meditate and journal about it. It's not like I thought I had to. In fact, I kind of wanted to run away from it at first, but I was like, I have to figure out what the fuck this was. And the only way I could do that was to just sit with myself and write about it.
Integration is everything, man. It's everything.
It is. It is. And intention. Like, we keep coming back to this intention. And, you know, everyone that, again, is struggling with food or struggling with anything like that, like, that is one thing you could ask yourself is like, what am I intending to do with this? Because if it was anything like me, like I said, before I had the relationship to food I have now, food was a comfort for me. It was a thing when I felt shitty about myself. Oh, let's just order a pizza, or let's get a bunch of candy, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Fast food, any shit food, any junk food. And I would surmise that actually that's the reason why I wanted that shitty food, is because I felt shitty about myself. Because now I'm realizing, like, once I actually have worked through some of that shit internally, I'm actually finding myself, like, I want to make better choices because I've actually gotten in tune with how the stuff makes me feel. And what it actually does to, again, soul, the person inside, whatever it is inside. Like, once you actually become in tune with that, and this is not to say I might get a pizza tonight. I don't know, right? I still eat shit food. That's not to say I don't eat junk, but it comes from a different place now. I don't do it to make myself feel better because I had a shitty day or something like that, right? And so I would say, like, as somebody that's struggled with food addiction for most of my life, I can sincerely say I was addicted to food in the standpoint in the what's Paul Chek say addiction is? Do you know his definition?
A repeated behavior that doesn't give you the outcome you desire.
Exactly. Okay, very good. So repeated behavior that doesn't give you the outcome you desire. So again, I would assert, like, if you are eating food at that rate, that is an addiction because it's not giving you the results that you want, but you're still doing it anyway. Now, if somebody said, hey, like, I want to be overweight, or I need to gain weight, and then again, that intention is different, right? I think, like, when we talk about why are you doing something, that's really what intention is. And I think at the end of the day, like, that's really what matters, is what are you trying to get out of it? And as a bigger picture, like, what are you trying to get out of life? Like, are you just trying to skate by and just survive? Because I would say if you are, like, there's probably bigger fears of, like, death and bigger fears of, like, things that you haven't actually come to grips with. Because again, like, if you're constantly in that surviving, just skating by mode, you never actually get to tap into the creative and the loving nature of human beings and, like, what actually makes us great. But if you're constantly trying to just live every day in a state of survival, when am I going to get my next paycheck, all of this, and again, I only know so well because I'm still working through shit myself. This is not to say I've reached a point of superiority over anyone, because I haven't. But it's that constant work that you put in on yourself to give that just keeps basically furthering the wheel down the road. And it's a never-ending process. But I think, again, that's part of life. Or not, that isn't part of life. That is life. It's nothing that we're supposed to try to get to at the end. It's the joy and the ride along the way. And I feel like too many people are missing that. I really do.
I love that. I'm going to leave you with a final question here.
Okay.
Without your name, gender, career, accomplishments, or experiences, who are you?
I am a human being trying to transcend what it means to be human.
What do you believe it means to be human?
I personally believe the human is the ego and the being is the soul. And when I say transcend what it means to be human, I believe the soul's language from Ram Dass, he says the soul's language is love and truth. And just let that sink in for a minute. Like, love and truth. If that's really all you had internally, how fucking great of a world would this be? Honestly. Like, when it comes down to it, if you just loved everybody or everything that you were aware of and you always told the truth, sounds like a pretty great fucking life to me. I feel like if you had those two principles, you're like, that's what transcends humanity.
I love it. I'm going to just throw in a final disclaimer. I should probably put this in the intro or something, but we are not encouraging the use of illegal substances.
No.
This is strictly for educational purposes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. That was good.
That was awesome.
I loved it.
All right, guys. Bro. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.